Well, welcome to Thursday afternoon in the sunshine, and I'm drinking. Let me just check what this is. I'm drinking Brooklyn Brewery alcohol-free special effects hoppy lager. I can tell you it's really tasty. Anyway, I'm back again to add 5 more to my Dave's FAVE500 listing. This will be number 21 to 25, and it's also partly inspired by, and I'm going to make sure I get this right because I made a note here, by Tommy's Musical Adventures, and he put a video out a month ago called "Gimme Five Great Debuts." And so these 5 albums are going to be debuts. Now, Tommy put this a certain requirement on this. The albums had to be solid. Well, they wouldn't be in this list if they weren't solid. But they also had to be from artists who had substantial careers. And so he didn't really like one-offs. But I'm breaking Tommy's rule on the very first example I'm going to show, because this artist, these are a whole bunch of albums that were released. These are the CD versions. I've only got 2, these first 2, one of which was released posthumously on vinyl. And I'm talking about Grace by Jeff Buckley. So, Grace. Jeff Buckley, I was kind of familiar with his dad, Tim Buckley. And Tim Buckley was singer-songwriter whose music was nothing like James Taylor, for example, but it was kind of like jazz inflected. It wasn't commercial at all. So as far as I'm aware, Tim Buckley had no hit singles, although there's a handful of songs of his. I think Dolphins is one that is particularly revered. But anyway, my brother bought Dream Letter Live in London, which was Tim Buckley's a 90s release, early 90s release of a live show he made he performed in London in 1968, and I had a copy of that album and I listened to it quite extensively. So I was kind of, when Jeff Buckley emerged, when his son emerged, I was kind of open to giving this album a listen because the critics really went after this big style. They loved it. They absolutely loved Jeff Buckley. I think partly because he's a good-looking lad. He's got a very distinctive, broad-range voice. He could hit the high notes with great control. But he's also a good guitarist as well, and he wasn't afraid to do cover versions and so on. And this album came out, and I thought, well, I'm definitely going to try it. But also, I will add, amongst all of these albums, I'm just going to hold these up again here. Even though he died, I think at 27, all these albums have been released ever since. And there was, I was buying his CD singles back in the day, and I can't find them. But I think I may have sold them. But before I sold them, I made a little compilation. I called it Hallelujah Single B-Sides. What's the dates? Here, let's have a look. 1995 to 1998. And you've got a whole bunch of different tracks that all appeared on CD singles. But anyway, I think I may have sold them, like I said. But anyway, this album opens up. It's a hard album. Yeah, it's a hard album to get into. I mean, obviously, most music fans who really take an interest in music will know his cover version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, how magnificent that was. And it became a hit single, of course, at least here in the UK. I can't speak for other territories. And I can imagine people who bought that single went out to buy the album, and many of them would have been quite shocked, because the rest of the album is not like that at all. This is a tough album. He doesn't sound in all of these songs like he's having fun. It's quite hard, rocking in places, quite abrasive. I mean, the opening track, Mojo Pin, sounds like it could have been an outtake from Physical Graffiti. But there are, and that kind of goes on throughout the album. But you have Lilac Wine, Hallelujah, and Corpus Christi Carol, which are the moments within the album where he lets that kind of falsetto singing style come to the fore, and it's much more gentle. But having said all of that, it's very eclectic. It's definitely worth hearing. You've probably heard it already. I would suggest that if Jeff hadn't drowned so young, so early in his career, I think the nature of his music would have meant that his career would have had a ceiling. But because he drowned, he's become a legend. And it is sad, no doubt about it. But there you go, one of the great debuts. And even though Tommy might not say this shouldn't qualify because he didn't do much after this, his only other studio album, this one, My Sweetheart the Drunk, which came out on vinyl I think last year or the year before, that was released just after, posthumously, as I said earlier. But anyway, that's Jeff Buckley and Grace. Something quite different, and this is an 80s iconic album, and this is Shardi and Diamond Life. Absolutely gorgeous album. It was the soundtrack to 1,001 dinner parties throughout the 1980s. Everybody heard this. They kind of sashayed to it in nightclubs and bars. And it's stars, of course, Shardi Adu, who's the ex-model, who's got this beautiful, smoky, kind of jazz-inflected voice. It's kind of throaty, but it's instantly recognizable. And the hit singles on this, Smooth Operator, Your Love Is King was the first one. But it's just, let's pick out one or two others, of course. Frankie's First Affair, When Am I Going to Make a Living, I Will Be Your Friend, Why Can't We Live Together, which was written by Timmy Thomas, which I've heard, but I'm not that familiar with it. John the 6-inch pianist will know it well. But this is kind of smooth 80s jazz pop. And it's got, even though it was a really important album at the time, I just listened to this yesterday, and I just found it's got that 80s sheen about it, which immediately dates the album. And, if you grew up, I grew up in the 70s, and I was buying records in the 70s, and I embraced the 80s, and it was the sharp production, the fantastic pop music, the out there pop music that kind of stormed the charts. Everywhere you looked, there was really interesting artists and great albums and great singles coming out, getting into the charts, and this, of course, is one of them. But it does date the album, as I've suggested, and it doesn't, even though it was great at the time, it's not so great now. But I love Shardi. All her albums are worth hearing as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, definitely an 80s iconic album. Another 80s iconic album is the debut by the Smiths. Now, the Smiths, I've often wondered, what is the appeal of the Smiths? Because I'll be honest with you, I very rarely listen to a Smiths album from front to back. There's something about the sound that's just is too much for an album. I think 40 minutes is too long. I hear the individual tracks and I absolutely love them. And I saw them live only once. They came on and did 4 or 5 songs at Newcastle City Hall, and I think in 1986 on the Red Wedge tour, and they came unannounced. They'd not played any of the gigs on that tour, and they suddenly appeared at Newcastle out of the blue, and they were absolutely magnificent. We were about 3 or 4 rows from the front. It was just incredible. And I think Johnny Marr's on record, it's saying that was the Smiths at the peak of their powers, and that particular short appearance has gone down in Smith's legend, as it were. But this album, the singles are great. What have we got? Hand in Glove, What Difference Does It Make? It opens with beautiful Reel Around the Fountain. And there's something about the production on this which makes them sound, of course it sounds like indie, but it also sounds quite deep. And it's so well recorded. John Porter is the producer on this album. And he didn't produce, but he remixed Hand in Glove. And if you listen closely, it sounds like it's from a different place. The sound is not as deep and broad, because a lot of indie music, in my opinion, kind of sounds a little bit flat. It's not great on dynamics. It's mostly kind of loud, often fast. But the Smiths were different, and they managed to do some fast moments on this album, and of course elsewhere in their career. But also they had the courage to take things really slowly, and Reel Around the Fountain is a great example of that one. The other one I'd want to draw attention to is Suffer Little Children. I put a video out of an interview that I did with Fitz Electric Bar about 3 or 4 weeks ago now, which he published. And I put that interview on my channel last week. And in that interview, he asked me what was the saddest song of all time. And, I didn't know the question was coming, and I came up with an answer, which, it's a pretty sad song. But I kind of think that Suffer Little Children might be up there as the saddest song of all time. But yeah, I absolutely love this album. I know Morrissey is a love-hate figure, but he had and has oodles of charisma. He's very literary. He's created the best song titles in rock and pop music by a million miles. He's hilarious. And he's got an instantly recognizable voice as well. So I kind of, I like him. And even though I feel that Morrissey's solo albums are pretty much the same, I struggle to get through a whole one from front to back. Every time I hear him, I think, that's great, that's Morrissey. Really, really good. So anyway, that's definitely one of the best debuts of all time and deserves its place in Dave's FAVE500. Easily. Right, it's something completely different. It's no secret that I was a Genesis fan in the 1970s, and I was just hungry for anything associated with the band. And between albums, Phil Collins in particular would go off on these side projects, and one of them was a jazz fusion band called Brandex, and this is their debut, Unorthodox Behavior. Now, Phil played on 3 or 4 of their albums, but they continued for several more years after that and continued to tour for a good 20 years after that, maybe longer. But one of my brothers is a drummer, and I sent him the opening track on this album, Nuclear Burn. And what he did, he put it through some software to isolate the drums, because I think the drums sound fantastic. And he says the drumming is absolutely amazing. And it is so human because there are mistakes. It's not metronomic. It's just so exciting, and great dynamics from the quietest production, so with great big beefy bass drum going on and tom-toms everywhere. But this is a demonstration disc for me, because it's kind of he's on record for saying he's influenced by Billy Cobham and the Mahavishnu Orchestra, but there won't be any Mahavishnu Orchestra albums in my Dave's FAVE500 listing, because I just kind of get away with that shredding that comes from John McLaughlin. But John Goodsell, the guitarist on this album, fantastic melody. This is an instrumental album, but it's just full of exciting melodies and rhythms. It's great. It's very, very accessible. Although I say that, I've been listening to it for 40 odd years. But it's a great, great album. And whenever I want to test the sound of a hi-fi or a new piece of kit or a rearrangement, it's one of the albums I put on. So there you go. So that's 4 brilliant debuts. The 5th one I've talked about before, and I'm going to cut to that little clip from that video right now. But it is the magnificent Blue Nile and their debut, A Walk Across the Rooftops. So here's a clip that I made earlier, and I'll see you next time. And that is A Walk Across the Rooftops by the brilliant Blue Nile. Kind of a ambient synth pop, very sparse arrangements. It's only really got a couple of tracks that have kind of got a rhythm going, and including the single Tinseltown in the Rain, which sounds fantastic. But the arrangements are pretty sparse, so that you can kind of really hear the yearning voice of Paul Buchanan, the singer and main songwriter on this album. This is a promo, by the way. I didn't realise it's a stamped promo. Yeah, absolutely fantastic album. Really is the soundtrack to a rainy night in Glasgow, where the band's from. Just a brilliant, brilliant album.